needs a great big hand of applause for keeping all this together. And somewhere the little mic that's standing is here has been lost, and so I'm going to try to hold this and also look at my notes at the same time. So we're kind of we're field testing the new Harrisville Hall and the new sound system. So let me thank all of you for being here on this occasion. And Vicki, are you ready for me to go? Okay. Okay, thank you so much. And let me just start with the notes that I put together, and I'll try to look down and hold this where you can hear me. And I may not get to look at you now that I'm going to have to do this. But all of the events and stories that I'll tell here tonight are true. They all happened at Westminster Senior Living between April of 2014 and February of 2022. Jean Ellis and I are Presbyterians, but I have never fully understood John Calvin's doctrine of predestination. A little bit complicated for me. The events leading up to this evening have given me a hint, however, because they may have been predestined. Way back the first week of November, Ruth Sunil invited me to talk about my book, Releasing the Butterfly, A Love Affair in 4 Acts. Ruth thought that it was a love story and it would be appropriate for Valentine's. The very next day, the Westminster Play Reading Group met in the chapel to read the last act of Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. And since the Play Reading Group was formed in 2014 with about 9 citizens, the Westminster Group has read 33 plays, a play written by Shakespeare, followed by a play not written by Shakespeare. And the first play was King Lear. I had to miss the last reading session of Midsummer's Night Dream. The group then chose the next play to read, and I'll start back at that one. I had to miss the last reading session of Midsummer's Night Dream. I was not there that day. The group then chose the next play to read, and since Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays were on the horizon, they decided to wait until January to start reading. The group chose Thornton Wilder's classic, Our Town, first premiered in 1938. And just last Thursday, just about a week ago, the Westminster Play Reading Group read the third and the final act of Our Town. It was never my intention to write a book. There would be no Releasing the Butterfly, but for Thornton Wilder's Our Town. I was convinced that Alzheimer's had ended our lives. My therapy was to write a play, as I had been taught to do as a student of Paul Baker's at Baylor University. Scene by scene, night after night, often at 3 o'clock in the morning. A 3-act play morphed into a 5-act play about 5 years ago. So here is scene 1 of Act 1 that I thought I would be the only one to ever read it. And if those of you who've seen Our Town and remember it, the stage manager is a major performer in Our Town. So scene 1, Act 1 of the play. The stage manager enters from stage right. He picks up one of his folding chairs and he moves it to center stage. He sits down and he looks out into the audience and he tells them, Emily and George are fictional characters based on the painful reality of Alzheimer's. Our story will use Thornton Wilder's Our Town and theater in general as the vehicle to tell a love story that at its end is clouded by Alzheimer's. It will be a 2015 redo of the play, although it is not a play. I will be the storyteller, and I will also be George. And we'll be two distinct players. Remember, this is a play that I didn't know anybody would ever hear. But for much of the story, we will be one and the same. As Shakespeare reminds us, one man in his time plays many parts. Emily will not die in childbirth as she does in our town, but will live a full life. She will get the graduate degree she dreamed of as a little girl. She will marry George, have 2 children, 6 grandgirls. She will teach high school English and become a college professor. She will direct a women's program at a junior college. She will run a conference center at a major public university, and she will initiate travel abroad programs to Cambridge, Oxford, University of Scotland, and American University in France. She will initiate programs for retired adults and create computer and language programs. And she'll travel the world with George. She will also be the First Lady of a regional university and a chief campaigner for George to be elected as one of Texas' 31 state senators. There's much more, but Emily will fulfill her dreams. So then about 2 years ago, the play morphed again, this time into a fictional novel told by a fictional Emily, all in her voice, all in the voice of Emily. I called it One Hell of a Woman because it was a tribute to our love and life. And here's how Emily, the fictional person, started telling the story. These are in her words. My 14-year Alzheimer's journey began with a simple concern. It survived a tsunami. It now continues along an uncharted, vast wilderness river. I have a canoe and 2 sets of oars. George, my lover, rows with me. I was concerned about forgetting and not remembering, to getting lost while taking the grandgirls' daughters to school, to giving up my own car. Our canoe was a senior living apartment in a life care community, just in case dementia migrated to Alzheimer's. The tsunami hit one night when George looked into my face and he said he saw a ferocious lion. We now live apart. I am in 1115 of the memory unit on the 1st floor. George is in the independent living apartment on 3007 on the 3rd floor. But we still row together. We fell in love in the shadow of the Armstrong Browning Library on the campus of Baylor University. Elizabeth Barrett Browning laid the foundation for our life together in Sonnet 43 when she asked, "How do I love thee?" And then she said that we should count the ways that we love, and count we did for over 60 years. So many ways, so much love. But sadly, Miss Browning did not prepare us to know how to love as we trod through the slushy world of Alzheimer's. In the bleak house of Alzheimer's, love is fragile and often on the brink of losing its power. If one is not careful, everything can become medical, pharmaceutical, clinical, legal, agonizing, suffocating, both to the beloved with Alzheimer's and to the lover caregiver. She asked, how do I explain Alzheimer's? To me, it's like Carl Sandburg's poem Fog. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches, and then it moves on. Dementia creeps in on little cat feet as it sits on its silent haunches, waiting to pounce on you first with early stage Alzheimer's before it overwhelms you with a tidal wave after tidal wave of a catastrophic tsunami. It does not move on, it moves in. I can no longer see the Golden Gate Bridge. The first tidal wave is at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and silently slip out of bed. George is snoring. I sneak out of the apartment to go somewhere I desperately need to be. Nighttime building security notices me at the secured entry and exit to our complex. I am confused and disoriented. I do not know where I am or why I'm there. I cannot answer his gentle questions. He takes me by the hand and leads me back to 3007. I'm so happy to be with George. I give him a big hug. I take his hand and I said, let's go to bed. We snuggle up and drift off to sleep. Now back to me. I'm frustrated about what to do with these writings. An editor friend agreed to read the first 25 pages of One Hell of a Woman, and he told me that it's very difficult to tell a story in just one voice. He said, you need an editor. He recommended Marianne Roser, who said that to tell the story, it probably has to be a memoir to fill in many blanks. She helped me to take a 12,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and put it into Releasing the Butterfly. It took us about 8 months, but it all came to fruition and was self-published on Amazon November the 4th, 2020, just about a year ago. In my one and only meeting face-to-face with Marianne down in the old bistro, she warned me. She said, as we worked together through the process, that she was probably, in her words, going to kill several of my darlings. And by which she meant that many of the stories that were important to me, but maybe would not be part of the story. So here is one darling that did not make it into the book. I call it Zelda and Emily. Somewhere deep within me, the two females in my life were terrified. I'm deeply in love with both of them. Zelda is petite. Most of the time, her warm body snuggles up against my left leg, where she will shift from side to side to get closer and then flick her long, silky, soft black hair onto my chest. Often, I fall asleep, only to be awakened by her slow, deep, sounding breath. As I turn to pull her closer, I caress the nape of her neck and then her shoulder and her back. I can feel her eyes. My heart melts as I turn to stare into two languid black pearls looking deep into mine without one blink. Zelda is my roommate for the last 11 months. She is a 7-year-old Shih Tzu, the mother of 22 puppies, a 10-pound, lion-faced Tibetan Buddhist. Emily is tall and statuesque. Most of the time, she stretches her long, beautiful body diagonally across the eggshell yellow cover on her bed. She will motion for me to come sit beside her in that sly, mischievous way she has of just patting the spot next to her. I slide up close and cautiously take her hand, snuggling up as close as possible to her warm body. As she relaxes, she turns to put her head into the curve of my head and shoulder. We don't talk. We just breathe slowly, feel our two bodies blending into one. We doze. Emily is my wife at that time of 55 years, the girl and the woman with whom I've been in love for 65 years. She lives alone in apartment 115 on the first floor. I live alone in apartment 3007 on the third floor. The two females in my life were also goddesses. Zelda is my goddess Tishpa. Each morning she comes to sit in my lap and looks deeply into my eyes. There are no words, no movement, but it's spiritual. Emily is beautiful. She smiles. She winks at me, wiggles her nose to tease me, reaches out to hold my hand, gives me 2 kisses on the lips. We look into each other's eyes and I say, I love you. She looks deeply into mine and says, I love you too. It's spiritual. The 2 females in my life are possessed by demons. Zelda by lightning and thunderstorms. Emily by Alzheimer's. I cannot quiet the storms, nor can I eradicate or cure Alzheimer's. And several years ago, when our son began his recovery from alcoholism, Jean Alice and I each had a copy of Alcoholics Anonymous's 24 hours a day. And each morning, we would take turns reading the statement for the day, and then the other person would read the meditation for the day. And recently, I picked up a copy and started reading the page for the day. The morning I had set aside to organize my thoughts about surviving in the tunnel of Alzheimer's, I read the statement for the day, and then I noticed that I had Jean Alice's book. The sentence she had marked was with a green marker was this: all your life is a preparation for more good to be accomplished when God knows that you're ready for it. And reading that prompted me to look up my horoscope for the same day. It was a quotation by Leo Tolstoy. Tolstoy said, each time of life has its own kind of love. So let me return to those first terrific nights when I was the patient and the therapist. And this is the transition, because I tell the therapist, and here I'm using my name and Jean Alice's. Jean Alice and I are ready to share our stories as we have found a lot of light and love in the tunnel of Alzheimer's. We're convinced that God would approve. It's our hope and prayer that our journey with Alzheimer's will prove to be helpful to others on that journey. And recently, as an essential caregiver, which I was for several months, I sat with Jean Alice holding her hand and telling stories. She dozed, she laughed, she rolled those wonderful hazel eyes. We were making love. We were writing scene 1 of Act 5. And until COVID came around, we were moving right on through that. Jean Alice and I first met in the Hutchinson County Jail when she was 15 and I was 17. I will come back to that, but for right now, I want just to stress there were 3 themes from that meeting that have sustained us: our religious faith, our love for music, theater, books, literature, and the love of a boy and a girl. And this is coming to the book itself. Most of us do not talk about Alzheimer's. It's a stigma that had my friend come to my hospital room to tell me the story of his mother, which he had bottled up for 10 years. And here's the way I shared it in the book. Jerry was a retired judge. His mother had died 10 years earlier after a decade-long struggle with Alzheimer's. Jerry and I had known each other since law school, and we were good friends, but not super close. We had not seen each other for several months. When I was still in the hospital with my broken femur, Jerry called and asked if he could come to visit. I would like to tell you about my mother, he said. On the first of several daily visits to the hospital, Jerry shared his pain as he reluctantly accepted the reality of his mother's disease. She began to wander in the neighborhood. His father installed a device to prevent her from opening the door, but it did not solve the problem. So one day his father came in from the workshop in the backyard to find the family car fully loaded with all of her clothes. His wife of 63 years announced, "I have to go home." Jerry wept as he related a second episode. One evening, he joined his parents to take Mom out for dinner. Mother, father, and son were sitting in the car, ready to depart, when his mother blurted out, "We can't go without Daddy." Jerry listened to his dad, much like me, who tried to explain when I started to look into the mouth of a ferocious lion, and he said, "Honey, your dad died nearly 30 years ago." She wasn't going to hear of it. She most certainly did not want an explanation. She became more agitated and insisted, yelling, "We can't go without Daddy." A light came on to my judge friend. He said, "Mom, I just talked to Daddy, and he doesn't want to go just now." His mother was satisfied. A fib, made up on the fly, solved the problem. The family had dinner without Daddy. And then in chapter 60 in the book, I say there are moments of fun and laughter in the tunnel of Alzheimer's. And here's one of my favorites. And this is directly from it. Life with Gene Alice is different, but we still share moments of sheer pleasure. I look for ways to celebrate life with Jeannie beside me. I vow not to miss any chances and jump at the chance when Melissa, the memory unit's weekend nurse, calls me on a Saturday evening in the summer of 2019. "Mr. Sherman, would you be able to come over to the memory care garden just outside the dining room to sit with Mrs. Sherman and have a glass of wine? I'm trying an experiment to get residents out on Saturday and Sunday evenings, and I think it would help if you were here." I was there 10 minutes ahead of the 6:30 rendezvous. Melissa and Gene Alice hold hands as they make their way from the dining room. I meet them at the door. Jeannie and I share a rocker love seat. There are two of them out there, one on each side, and we snuggle up close, and she leans her head onto my shoulder. I lean over to kiss her ear. She laughs, and she flashes her infectious smile. We're making love as we've learned to do since the Alzheimer's tsunami. Several women join us. Health aides form a tight-knit circle of wheelchairs and walkers. Mary and Ann, two of the more mobile women, sit in the love seat directly across from us, and they slowly rock back and forth. We each have a small glass of wine. Mary, soon to be 100 years old, takes charge and leads us in singing "The Eyes of Texas." Over and over we sing "The Eyes of Texas." The same verse over and over. When Ann has had enough of "The Eyes of Texas," she points to Gene Alice and then she looks at me. "Is that your girlfriend or your wife?" I say, "She's my wife." He said, "Where'd you meet her?" I said, "We met in jail." "Oh," she said, "that can't be true. Tell us about it." The women all perk up. I know that these women with Alzheimer's and dementia probably will not be able to follow a long-winded story, so I give an abbreviated version of the true story. I was one of 4 high school boys who held a church service each Sunday afternoon at the Hutchinson County Jail. We invited an all-boy quartet to come and sing. And one Sunday, they brought a beautiful young girl to accompany them on an old Army fold-up field organ. As she was unfolding it, I saw her elegant ankles. And I said to myself, I'm going to marry that girl. And 7 years later, I did. The audience of women with dementia applaud, and in unison they urge me to tell it again, tell it again. For several Saturday night evenings, this was the routine. Sing the Eyes of Texas several times and recite the jailhouse story several times. The women never seemed to be tired of it, but I did. So the next evening when Ann goes to me, tell how you met that girl. I make up a story. I say, one day, I was riding my pony across the plains and it came upon a teepee village. As I got closer, this stunningly beautiful girl popped out of one of those teepees without a stitch of clothes on. She jumped on a white stallion, started riding across the plains, and I said, by gum, I want to catch her. The women burst out laughing, even those in wheelchairs who seldom raised their heads. Several of the ones who barely speak joined the chorus. Tell us about the teepees. Tell us about the teepees. I had become the grand storyteller. Ann keeps baiting me. Tell more, and there has to be more. What happened next? When did you see her again? Did you ever know she was watching you? I hesitated to tell what might be considered an off-color story to a group of older, probably pretty conservative women. But then I remembered the most important woman in Jean Alice's life, and that was her mother, Tavia, the daughter of a Baptist minister. She would laugh uproariously at a dirty joke. And I decided that most of these women in the Memory Garden audience were cut from the same cloth. They would never admit it, but they too loved a risque story. I rose to the occasion with an even more daring story of the young girl in the teepee. I tell them that I followed her. I snuck up on a hill to watch her bathe in the spring. Ann is satisfied. The women don't laugh, but they do smile approvingly. And then last December, a year ago, Charles McCormick, who's the president of Schreiner University down in Kerrville, and I served on that board for about 9 years, he read Releasing the Butterfly over the Christmas holidays, and he wrote me a note. He said, my mother passed away several years ago after struggling with Lewy body dementia, very similar to Alzheimer's disease. I remember her turning on my father in just the same way Jean Alice challenged you. But they also shared some sweet memories of delight. And he said, I look forward to sharing the book with my father. And then later, he wrote me another note. And in that one, he said, I did want to share with you something you inspired my father to do, write. He loved your book, but since he spent his career as an oil jobber in Scurry County, he never considered himself a writer. Apparently, you convinced him to give writing a try. On Monday afternoon, he sent me this poem that he had prepared about going to the doctor earlier in the day with my sister, Cindy. And then Charlie said, I hope you enjoy it. And I share it now with you. It's called A Visit to the Doctor. This is written by someone who was not a writer, had never written before. I had an appointment. My daughter drove me. I pushed back, but not hard. Is it time that if I leave town, I need a driver? We drove for about 45 minutes and sat in silence until it was time to go in. The lady at the desk in the clinic looked into these tired old eyes and did not look at me again. She addressed all the questions and communications to my daughter. She pushed out a paper for me to sign. I was determined to prove that I was not senile. I grabbed a pen. There were 2 small buckets of pens, and I took the one from the one on the left. The woman said condescendingly, those are used and perhaps contaminated. The ones on the right have been cleaned and sanitized. When the doctor came in, he said that I had my mask on upside down. Disappointed at how I came across in the clinic, my driver asked permission to come in with me to see the doctor. I was a little put out. She was taking notes and asking questions. Before we left, I knew it was good that she was there. That driver's name was either Skippy or Cindy, and then he had a little addendum called senility. I can see it. It looks like fog. I can smell it, repugnant. I can taste it, bitter. I can feel it, cold. I can hear it like a rushing river. I sidestepped it today. I will dodge it tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, and the day after that. Maybe the angels will come to carry me away before it covers me. If not, I will struggle and fight to get free. And then I'm asked frequently what was one of the most important lessons I learned, and this is my chapter, a very small chapter, 46, at page 193. The volcano that simmered deep within Jean Alice's mind erupted one morning, and of all places, the elevator at Westminster. We were heading out to her weekly Pilates session to join her 5 friends. I made the breakfast, I laid out her work clothes, and I nudged her and I said, let's be on time. I held her hand as we hurried to the elevator. She was smiling and saying, oh, don't worry, they won't start without me. As the elevator reached the garage floor where our Volkswagen was parked, she backed away to the far side of the elevator, crouched with her shoulders hunched back, looked me straight in the eye and exploded, I'm not going to that place again. I was certain that she did not know what that place was, just as she had no idea where or what the club or the school was. Her powerfully ingrained instinct was for her to decide whether to go or not to go somewhere. I was out of line to think that I was in charge. She had always jealously guarded her right to be in charge of decisions affecting her. That was the key to her identity. I had failed to appreciate that fact on that morning, alone in the elevator with Jeannie. I now realized that to her, I was a drill sergeant, incessantly barking out orders. Get in line, you're out of step, hurry up, you're late, do this, do that. It wasn't just about leaving the house and being on time for appointments. I was making all of the decisions. I chose the television shows to watch. I chose the food we ate. I chose the clothes she wore. I did the driving. I read the map and determined the route, something that she had always done. I selected the paragraph from the newspaper for us to read together, and then I read it to her. I suggested it was time to take the dog for a walk. I urged her to play the piano. And my ultimate insult was to say, let's be on time. Inside her, the Jeannie I had always known was shouting, I am Jeannie, don't treat me like a thing. I am Jeannie. I am a strong, confident woman. I was stealing Jeannie from Jeannie, nibble by nibble, in the midst of the storm. I forgot that I was her partner, not her parent. Instead of making every decision for her, I should have asked her what she wanted. Would you prefer chocolate or strawberry ice cream? What do you want to watch tonight, a comedy or a spy story? Should we sing hymns or songs from musicals? Are you about ready to go to bed? Most of the times she would say, oh, you decide. But I had missed the headline. She wanted to be asked. No, she needed to be asked. She wanted to be treated like she was someone, like Jeannie. And now she had to defend herself or risk totally losing her autonomy. All of this is obvious to me now, but in the moment, I was furious. I exploded with my own profusion of pent-up frustration that morning, and I said, don't ever say that again. We're going to keep exercising, working puzzles, reading books, seeing movies, doing everything possible to stay alive as long as we're alive. I didn't realize it then, but I was grieving. Just as all caregivers mourn the lives that they once had in the persons their loved ones had been before Alzheimer's marked them indelibly. And then I said, I wanted my Jenny back. And a lot of women here, I proposed to Jean Alice 3 times before she finally said yes. And here is her response to my very first proposal when she turned me down. She said, most, if not all, of the females I looked up to as role models as I was growing up lived with dreams unfulfilled. Teachers who had 1 degree but not the graduate degree of their dreams. Housewives who dreamed to travel to New York City, San Francisco, or even Budapest, but who never got as far as Dallas or Oklahoma City. Church musicians who never got to hear a performance in any of the great cathedrals or concert halls. Even preachers' wives who never got to dance. The list is endless. In almost every instance, the dream died by falling in love, getting married, and having children. I cried when you first read the parable of the butterfly to me because I saw myself as the butterfly. I love flying free and dreaming. I do not want to be cooped up in a bowl or in a pocket. I could not explain then, and it's hard now, because I do think we're falling in love, and I'm very happy when I'm with you, but Max, I'm still the butterfly. I just have to fulfill my dreams. I don't know when I will fly, where I will fly, but I have to be free to try. Let me move toward just concluding these remarks, because for several years we went to see Dr. John Hart at Southwest Medical School in Dallas. He was the key doctor for the Brain Health Center in Dallas, and we started going there in 2003. So we're in Dr. Hart's office where we went regularly. He had interviewed us and talked to both of us, but on this occasion, we're back in his office, and to get my perspective on where Jean Alice and I are, he leans in closely, and he speaks gently in our last meeting with him. He says, tell me about your favorite memory about the world of politics. I think to myself, is this a trick question? I wonder, because I had many great memories. Being elected the first time to the state senate, serving as honorary role one day as governor for the damn state of Texas, campaigning with Jean Alice. And here I stop, because I know, and Jean Alice must have known, that she would have been a great senator if only the times in our conservative Senate district had been more welcoming to women candidates. I can't help but tell Dr. Hart about the speech that she gave in 1988 for this Distinguished Women's Service Awards, sponsored by a group that she had helped create in 1976. She urged more women to get involved in politics, saying that women would make the world a more equal and better place. Jean Alice made the world a better place, I tell Dr. Hart. He nods, and Lincoln tells me he has one last question. I will never get to interview Mrs. Sherman again, so tell me, how will you remember her? Well, this one's easy. It is a blend of beauty, music, and intelligence. I recall for him our trip to Israel and the Mahler performance by the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra. There's not an empty seat in the house, and we're part of a U.S. delegation that includes politicians at all levels of government. We are the guest of honor, and we're seated in the first 2 rows just below the conductor. Jean Alice and I are in the 2 end seats on the right aisle, the 2nd row. At the intermission, we scatter to the restrooms. Men go out the door to the left, women to the right. The lights are dimming to start the second half of the concert, and Jean Alice is still not there. And I know that women's restrooms, wherever we go for a big event, are always packed. Jean Alice rushes back toward the auditorium door, and it closes just seconds before she reaches it. And then she later tells me, when I arrived at the door at the right front of the auditorium, a young Israeli soldier stepped in front of me and lifted his AK-47 across his chest to block the entrance. I looked him straight in the eye and I confidently said, "It is important that I get to my seat." He didn't know whether to shoot me or to let me in, so he opened the door. Zubin Mehta, the 39-year-old conductor, is poised. Like Batman over Gotham, his baton is raised to strike the first note of Gustav Mahler's Symphony No. 2, The Resurrection. At that very moment, he must have noticed the door hurriedly open and a woman walking. He watches a stunning 37-year-old blonde girl glide down the aisle, unabashed and unhurried, to take her seat beside me. Mayetta then lowers his baton. He turns graciously to allow the elegant golden gown beauty to be seated. He then returns his baton to its poised position, and music fills the hall. I'm convinced that I saw him and Jeannie nod to each other, and there were whispers in the audience. Who is that? Is she a Scandinavian princess? Could she be the wife of one of the governors? Jean Alice Wigmore Sherman knew exactly who she was. Always has. A butterfly who knows exactly who she is and where she's going. So I'll try to respond, but I tried to pull together how the book happened, how it came together, and it's been a wonderful journey, and some of you here have been part of it. Hal, may I tell something on you?
Sure.
Hal and Martha Hobson are new residents here at Westminster. They've been here about 6 weeks now, and we've been friends for a long time. Hal is a great writer of hymns and rangers, and about 3,000, a lot of them. And last winter, he read the book, and at some point later, I hope that you get to hear him, but he wrote a tune. It's called Jean Alice's Tune, in four verses based on the passage in Ecclesiastes. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of music called Jean Alice's Tune. So we're going to hear it one day, Hal. So, well, thanks all of you for being here. And I have 3 books I'm willing to give away. I don't sell books because anything from the book goes to Boston Presbyterian Seminary, but I have 3. If anyone wants one, I'd be glad. They're in my trolley, which God will help me get out. I'd be glad for someone to have them. But anyway, it's been a great pleasure. And I thank Ruth Nanil because she had the idea to do this back the first week of November. So it's really her party, and Vicki and she work together so closely. But Vicki, give Ruth a hug for us and tell her we're glad she's back and had a good vacation in India. And Jean Alice has a helper named Monique, and Monique, they had flower arranging this morning over in the memory unit, and this is what they did this morning, so it was only done this very morning.
Fabulous. Fabulous.